You think you know power. Think again. Forget kings and armies for a moment. The true titans of the Renaissance moved mountains of gold, whispered in the ears of popes, and shaped empires with a stroke of a pen. Their names were not always on battlefields, but their influence was absolute. Hidden in the shadows of Florence, a family built an empire unlike any before it, the Medici. And behind their glittering facade, a select group of financial masterminds pulled the strings of Europe. These were not just clerks, they were financial ninjas, art patrons, and political operators, all bound by an invisible web of debt and ambition. Their stories are a testament to how money, not swords, truly ruled the world. Number 10. The Warrior Duke and his Medici gold. Imagine a warlord, a duke with a legendary profile and a thirst for knowledge, whose grand ambitions and artistic splendors were utterly reliant on a single bank. Federico da Montefeltro, the famed Duke of Urbino, was not an employee of the Medici Bank. He was something even more significant for their network, a colossal, indispensable client. His life, his wars, and the very stones of his magnificent palace in Urbino were all financed by the Florentine bankers. He stands as a powerful example of how the Medici's wealth didn't just flow within their branches, but was also used to fuel the ambitions of Europe's most formidable rulers, making them financially tethered to Florence. Federico's story began not in a banker's office, but on the battlefield. Born in 1422, an illegitimate son of Guidantonio da Montefeltro, the Count of Urbino, Federico carved out his own destiny. He became a condottiero, a mercenary captain whose military prowess was legendary across Italy. He was known for his tactical brilliance, his distinctive profile missing an eye from a jousting accident, and a stern yet respected demeanor. Unlike many condottieri who were merely brutal, Federico was also a scholar, an avid reader, and a discerning patron of the arts. He created one of the most intellectually vibrant courts in Italy, attracting philosophers, artists, and architects to his remote hilltop duchy. Yet, this ambition, both military and cultural, came with an enormous price tag. Enter the Medici Bank. The relationship between Federico and the Medici was not merely transactional, it was deeply strategic. The Medici needed powerful allies and profitable ventures for their vast capital. Lending to rulers, despite the inherent risks, offered immense potential for influence and profit. Federico, constantly embroiled in wars or preparing for them, was always in need of funds to pay his highly skilled troops, acquire weapons, and maintain his impressive court. The Medici stepped in, providing the necessary liquidity that kept his duchy afloat and his ambitions alive. Records from the Medici archives, meticulously preserved, show a constant flow of loans and financial arrangements between the bank and the Duchy of Urbino. These were not small sums. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of florins, a currency of incredible purchasing power in the 15th century. To put it into perspective, a well-paid craftsman might earn a few dozen florins a year. Federico's loans were equivalent to entire national budgets. This money was disbursed through complex instruments like letters of exchange, which allowed the Medici to transfer vast sums across Italy and beyond without physically moving heavy, vulnerable gold coin. A letter issued in Florence could be honored by a Medici agent in Venice or Rome, allowing Federico to pay his soldiers or purchase supplies wherever he was campaigning. The risks for the Medici were substantial. Lending to rulers was always precarious. If Federico lost a war, or died suddenly, or simply chose to default, the Medici could face enormous losses. Yet, they calculated these risks, often securing the loans against future tax revenues of Urbino or guarantees from other powerful families. The trust placed in Federico and his reputation for honoring his debts, despite the scale, was a crucial factor. Historians like Raymond de Rouver, who extensively studied the Medici Bank's ledgers, highlight how central these high-stakes political loans were to the bank's overall strategy, bringing both immense profit and significant peril. Beyond the battlefield, Medici money built wonders. Federico's ducal palace in Urbino stands as a monument to Renaissance architecture and art, a structure that truly encapsulates his dual nature as warrior and scholar. This palace, with its sprawling courtyards, magnificent library containing thousands of illuminated manuscripts, and exquisite art collections, was built with funds heavily supplied by the Medici. The lavish decorations, the salaries for the scholars and artists, the very materials for construction all were facilitated by the credit lines extended by the Florentine bankers. It was a direct consequence of Medici financial support that Urbino transformed from a provincial stronghold into a celebrated hub of culture. The relationship also had profound political implications. By funding Federico, the Medici indirectly influenced the balance of power across the Italian peninsula. When Federico fought for or against various city-states, the Medici's financial backing could be the deciding factor in victory or defeat. This gave the Florentine bankers a subtle but potent form of leverage. They were not just financiers, they were enablers of state power, their loans shaping alliances and determining the fate of territories. For example, during the turbulent Italian wars that erupted later in the century, the strategic importance of figures like Federico, heavily indebted to and reliant on the Medici, became even more apparent. The story of Federico da Montefeltro and the Medici Bank is a story of symbiotic power, where Federico provided the Medici with a high-stakes, high-reward investment, a steady stream of interest payments, and invaluable political connections through his military might. The Medici provided Federico with the financial lifeblood that allowed him to rise from a condottiero to a revered duke, a cultural luminary, and a respected figure on the Italian stage. His legacy, carved in stone and painted on canvas in Urbino, remains a testament to the quiet, profound power of the Medici's gold, shaping destinies far beyond the bustling streets of Florence. He was a power player not by working for the Medici, but by letting the Medici work for him, forging a bond of debt and influence that defined his very existence. Number 9. The Palazzo Builder and the Medici Connection. Step into the heart of Florence, and you will find an architectural marvel, a palace so grand and elegant it whispers tales of immense wealth and political savvy. The Palazzo Rucellai, with its groundbreaking use of classical orders, stands as a testament to Giovanni Rucellai, a merchant and banker of extraordinary ambition and influence. While not an employee of the Medici Bank, Rucellai was a vital cog in the broader Medici network. He was a strategic ally through marriage, a significant client, and a major Florentine entrepreneur whose vast enterprises often intertwined with the Medici's own financial interests. His story reveals how the Medici solidified their power not just through their own bank, but by integrating other wealthy families into their orbit through a web of financial ties and strategic alliances. Giovanni Rucellai was born in 1403 into an old Florentine family with a long history in the wool and silk trade. The Rucellai, like many prominent Florentine families, were merchants first and bankers second, often lending money as a way to facilitate their trade and invest their profits. Giovanni inherited this mercantile acumen and amplified it. He was a shrewd businessman, expanding his family's textile operations across Europe, from London to Constantinople. His ships traversed the Mediterranean laden with precious silks and woolens, bringing back wealth to Florence. This extensive network of trade required sophisticated financial mechanisms, and Giovanni was an expert at navigating the complex world of international finance. The Rucellai family had historically been rivals to the Medici, a common dynamic among powerful Florentine clans. However, Cosimo de' Medici, the patriarch of the Medici banking dynasty, understood the power of alliances, especially through marriage. In 1461, Giovanni Rucellai's son, Bernardo, married Cosimo's granddaughter, Nannina de' Medici. This marriage was a masterstroke of political and social engineering. It formally linked two of Florence's wealthiest and most influential families, symbolizing a pact of cooperation rather than competition. For Giovanni, this union provided access to the immense political capital and financial muscle of the Medici. For the Medici, it brought the Rucellai's vast mercantile network and their considerable wealth into their sphere of influence. Financially, Giovanni Rucellai was a substantial client of the Medici Bank. His extensive trading ventures required constant access to credit, letters of exchange, and reliable banking services across Europe. The Medici Bank, with its network of branches in major European cities like London, Bruges, and Rome, was perfectly positioned to serve his needs. Rucellai likely deposited significant sums with the Medici, used their international payment system to pay for goods, and secured loans from them to finance his grand projects. Historians of Florentine commerce emphasize how intertwined the financial lives of leading families became, with credit lines flowing back and forth, creating a dense web of interdependency. Giovanni Rucellai's most enduring legacy is the Palazzo Rucellai. Commissioned in the mid-1400s, possibly from Leon Battista Alberti, one of the greatest architects and humanists of the Renaissance, the palace was a bold statement of his family's prestige and wealth. It was innovative, departing from the fortress-like appearance of older Florentine palaces. Its facade, with its 3 distinct tiers, separated by classical pilasters, was a groundbreaking work, influencing palace design for centuries. Building such a structure was an enormous undertaking, requiring immense capital and skilled labor over many years. It is widely understood that the financing for this magnificent structure, among Rucellai's other ambitious projects like the chapel and San Pancrazio, relied heavily on the credit and financial services provided by the Medici Bank. The construction of the Palazzo Rucellai was not just an architectural project, it was also a political act. In Florence, visible displays of wealth and patronage were crucial for asserting social standing. By building such an impressive residence, Giovanni Rucellai signaled his family's power, a power now formally aligned with the dominant Medici. This partnership was beneficial to both sides. The Medici gained an important, wealthy, and well-connected ally, helping to solidify their control over Florence's civic life. Rucellai gained the prestige and protection that came with being part of the Medici's inner circle, allowing his commercial empire to flourish under their informal umbrella. Giovanni Rucellai was also an active participant in Florentine politics, holding various public offices, though always deferring to the Medici. And he understood the delicate balance of power in the Republic and the importance of maintaining Cosimo de' Medici's favor. His memoirs, known as the Zibaldone, provide invaluable insights into the daily life and financial dealings of a prominent Florentine merchant of the era. He writes about his family, his business, and his understanding of fortune and virtue, always emphasizing the importance of hard work and good management, echoing the values that also underpinned the Medici's success. His story illustrates how the Medici Bank wasn't just a financial institution, but a powerful instrument of social and political integration. By offering indispensable services, forging strategic marriages, and supporting the grand projects of other wealthy families, the Medici wove themselves into the very fabric of Florentine society. Giovanni Rucellai, the shrewd merchant and builder of the magnificent Palazzo Rucellai, stands as a prime example of a powerful Florentine figure who, through a blend of financial necessity and strategic alliance, became an integral and very rich part of the extensive Medici network, enriching both himself and the dominant family of Florence. Number 8. The fallen titan of Florence. Imagine a city ruled by competing giants, where immense wealth and political power were fiercely contested. Before the Medici fully consolidated their grip on Florence, another family stood as the city's undisputed financial titan, even more powerful than the emerging Medici Bank. Palla Strozzi, born in 1372, was not merely a wealthy merchant, he was the richest man in Florence during the early 15th century, a scholar, a humanist, and a leader of the old Florentine oligarchy. His story is a dramatic tale of a colossal fortune, a political misstep, and the ultimate fall that cleared the path for the Medici's ascendancy. He was not in the Medici network, but his downfall was absolutely crucial for the Medici network to truly dominate. The Strozzi family was ancient, powerful, and deeply entrenched in Florentine politics and commerce. Palla Strozzi inherited a vast fortune that dwarfed even the early Medici wealth. His family's primary business was silk manufacturing and trade, which brought in immense profits from across Europe and the East. Unlike many Florentine merchants, Palla was also an intellectual. He spoke Greek, collected ancient manuscripts, and was a prominent patron of humanist scholars. He amassed one of the largest and most significant private libraries in Florence, a testament to his cultivated tastes and intellectual curiosity. His wealth was not just in money, it was in land, in businesses, and in the sheer weight of his family's centuries-long prominence. Palla Strozzi's financial power was undeniable. He routinely loaned money to the Florentine government, often at critical junctures when the Republic faced financial crises due to wars or ambitious civic projects. These loans gave him considerable leverage and influence over state affairs. His private bank, though perhaps not as sprawling as the later Medici network, handled vast sums of money, facilitated trade, and engaged in international finance. He was a master of the complex financial instruments of the day, moving capital with an expertise that few could rival. His financial success was built on a foundation of sound judgment, shrewd investments, and an extensive network of commercial contacts. The central drama of Palla Strozzi's life unfolded in the political arena. He was a leader of the conservative aristocratic faction in Florence, a group that deeply resented the rising influence and populist tactics of the Medici, particularly Cosimo de' Medici. While the Medici were relatively new money compared to the old guard like the Strozzi, their aggressive banking practices and strategic political maneuvering allowed them to quickly accumulate power and popularity among the middle classes. The conflict between the Strozzi and the Medici was not just about money, it was about the very soul of Florence, pitting old aristocratic privilege against new mercantile dynamism. In 1433, the tension finally boiled over. Palla Strozzi, along with his ally Rinaldo degli Albizzi, led a coup against Cosimo de' Medici. They managed to have Cosimo arrested and exiled from Florence. It was a moment of triumph for the old guard, a temporary victory that seemed to confirm their continued dominance. However, Palla, despite his wealth and influence, lacked Cosimo's decisiveness and ruthlessness. He was a scholar and a diplomat, not a hardened political operator. He hesitated, failed to fully dismantle the Medici's networks, and underestimated the depth of their support. Cosimo's exile lasted less than a year. His immense financial network, his powerful allies outside Florence, and the widespread support he had cultivated among the Florentine populace enabled him to make a triumphant return in 1434. When Cosimo returned, he did so with absolute authority. He purged his enemies, and Palla Strozzi was a prime target. Palla, along with his family, was exiled from Florence. This was not a temporary banishment, it was permanent. The consequences for Palla Strozzi were devastating. His vast properties in Florence were confiscated. His businesses, though largely managed by his agents abroad, suffered immensely from the loss of his direct oversight and his political standing in Florence. He moved to Padua, where he lived out the remainder of his long life, continuing his scholarly pursuits, but never returning to the center of Florentine power. He died in 1462, a man of immense wealth and intellect, but ultimately a victim of the ruthless power struggle with the Medici. Palla Strozzi's fall was Cosimo de' Medici's definitive victory. By removing the city's richest and most influential rival, Cosimo cleared the way for the Medici family to become the undisputed masters of Florence. The vacuum left by the Strozzi's immense wealth and political power was quickly filled by the Medici Bank and its expanding network. The assets seized from the exiled families, including the Strozzi, further enriched the Medici coffers. Historians often point to 1434 as the true beginning of Medici dominance in Florence, and Palla Strozzi's banishment was the critical moment that solidified their rise. He was a powerful banker in his own right, but his story highlights the brutal, high-stakes nature of Florentine politics and finance, where even the richest man could be overthrown by a more strategically astute rival, thereby paving the way for the ultimate Medici takeover. Number 7. The Bruges Gambler and Europe's Costly Kings. Imagine a man who held the purse strings to kings, who loaned vast sums to the most powerful rulers in Europe, yet whose audacious risks ultimately brought significant damage to one of the most powerful financial houses of the Renaissance. Tommaso Portinari, the manager of the Medici Bank's Bruges branch from the 1460s onwards, was one such figure. He was a powerful banker in his own right, entrusted with immense responsibility, but his ambition and willingness to engage in high-stakes political loans, particularly to the Duke of Burgundy, ultimately led to colossal losses for the Medici Bank. His story serves as a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and the perilous intersection of finance and royal power. Tommaso Portinari, born around 1432, hailed from a respected Florentine family, though not as prominent as some of the Medici's other key managers. He began his career in the Medici Bank in Bruges, one of the most important trading and financial centers in Northern Europe. Bruges was a hub for luxury goods, textiles, and international finance, making the Medici branch there a crucial link in their global network. Portinari quickly rose through the ranks, demonstrating an early talent for financial operations and cultivating connections with the powerful Burgundian court. By 1465, he was made the general manager of the Bruges branch, a position of enormous trust and responsibility, particularly for a relatively young man. Portinari's power stemmed from his direct control over the Bruges branch's considerable capital and his personal relationships with Europe's elite. Unlike other branch managers who focused primarily on safe, profitable trade finance, Portinari harbored grander ambitions. He sought to elevate the Medici Bank's standing by becoming the principal financier for powerful rulers, most notably Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy. Charles was a charismatic but reckless ruler, constantly engaged in costly wars to expand his sprawling, wealthy territories. He needed vast sums of money, and Portinari was willing to supply it, albeit at ever-increasing risk to the Medici Bank's assets. The loans to Charles the Bold were staggering. Portinari lent him hundreds of thousands of florins, a sum that represented a significant portion of the entire Medici Bank's capital. These were not typical commercial loans. They were essentially war loans, often secured against dubious future revenues or promises that were difficult to enforce. Portinari was deeply entrenched in the Burgundian court, not just as a banker, but as a diplomat and an advisor. He used his position to influence policy and secure lucrative contracts, such as the right to collect customs duties in certain Burgundian territories. His connections even extended to painting commissions. He commissioned Hugo van der Goza's famous Portinari altarpiece, a magnificent work that arrived in Florence and profoundly influenced Italian Renaissance art, showcasing his wealth and cultural sophistication. However, the loans to Charles the Bold quickly became a massive problem. Charles was an aggressive, impetuous ruler who continually overspent and rarely repaid his debts on time. His military campaigns, particularly against the Swiss Confederacy, were incredibly expensive and ultimately disastrous. As Charles's fortunes declined, so too did the prospects of the Medici recovering their money. Portinari, deeply invested both financially and personally in Charles's success, continued to extend credit, betting on a turnaround that never came. He seemed unwilling or unable to cut his losses, perhaps blinded by the allure of power and the possibility of immense future profits. The consequences for the Medici Bank were severe. The massive unrepaid loans to Charles the Bold became a huge drain on the bank's liquidity. Lorenzo de' Medici, who had by then inherited the leadership of the Medici family, and the bank grew increasingly frustrated with Portinari's reckless management. Letters from Lorenzo to Portinari, preserved in the Medici archives, express exasperation and concern over the enormous sums tied up in the Burgundian venture. Lorenzo even dispatched agents to Bruges to try and rein in Portinari and assess the true extent of the losses. When Charles the Bold was killed in battle in 1477, the entire debt became virtually uncollectible. The bank faced a catastrophic write-off. While the Medici Bank was large enough to absorb these losses without immediately collapsing, the incident severely weakened its financial standing. It exposed a fundamental flaw in the bank's risk management and contributed significantly to its long-term decline. The immense losses in Bruges, largely due to Portinari's high-risk strategy, forced the Medici to pull back from ambitious political lending and focus on more conservative commercial ventures, yet the damage was done. Tommaso Portinari remained connected to the Medici, for some years, even after the Bruges debacle, indicating the complex web of relationships and shared blame. However, his reputation as a financial manager was severely tarnished. His story illustrates how a powerful, ambitious branch manager, granted too much autonomy and blinded by the proximity to royal power, could inflict lasting damage on even the most robust financial empire. Portnere's gamble on Charles the Bold was one of the most audacious and ultimately most costly decisions made by any individual within the vast Medici network, a stark reminder that even gold can be lost to the whims of kings. Number 6. The papal purser in Rome's golden keys. Imagine a man who held the direct line to the Pope's treasury, managing the vast revenues of the Catholic Church and acting as a central banker to the holiest institution in Europe. Giovanni Tornabuoni was exactly that figure, the immensely powerful and trusted manager of the Medici Bank's Rome branch for over 2 decades. His story is one of unwavering loyalty, shrewd financial management, and the incredible political and economic influence that came with being the Pope's banker. He was not just a numbers man, he was a diplomat, a political operator, and a key architect of the Medici's undisputed sway over the papal finances, a position that brought immense profit and invaluable political leverage. Giovanni Tornabuoni, born around 1424, belonged to a prominent Florentine family with strong ties to the Medici. His sister, Lucrezia Tornabuoni, married Piero di Cosimo de' Medici, making him Lorenzo the Magnificent's uncle. This familial connection was crucial, cementing a bond of trust that allowed him to be placed in one of the most sensitive and lucrative positions within the Medici network. The Rome branch of the Medici Bank was arguably its most important, second only to the head office in Florence. The papacy, with its vast income from tithes, offerings, and taxes collected across Christendom, was the single largest and most reliable client the Medici Bank ever had. Tornabuoni began his career in the Medici Bank in Florence and quickly proved his financial acumen. By the 1460s, he was dispatched to Rome to take over the crucial branch. For more than 20 years, from 1465 until his death in 1490, he served as the general manager in Rome. His responsibilities were immense. He handled all the papacy's incoming and outgoing funds, a staggering flow of wealth. He managed the collection of papal revenues from throughout Europe, often coordinating with other Medici branches. He provided loans to the popes for their lavish building projects, military campaigns, and administrative expenses. He was essentially the Vatican's chief financial officer, providing banking services, investment advice, and credit. The power of Giovanni Tornabuoni derived directly from his intimate relationship with the reigning Popes Paul II, Sixtus IV, and Innocent VIII. He was their go-to man for all financial matters. This meant he had unparalleled access to the highest levels of the church. He wasn't just a banker, he was a trusted advisor, a conduit for political messages, and a source of intelligence. For example, during the turbulent Pazzi conspiracy in 1478, which saw the assassination of Lorenzo de' Medici's brother, Giuliano, and an attempt on Lorenzo's life, the papacy under Sixtus IV was deeply implicated. It was Tornabuoni in Rome who had to navigate the incredibly delicate situation representing Medici interests while managing the papacy's finances. His loyalty to the Medici was unwavering even under immense pressure. The financial relationship with the papacy was incredibly lucrative for the Medici. They earned substantial commissions on all transactions, interest on their loans, and profit from currency exchange. The sheer volume of transactions meant a constant stream of income. The Rome branch also acted as a vital intelligence hub for the Medici, giving them insight into papal politics, European diplomacy, and economic trends. Tornabuoni's reports back to Florence were invaluable, allowing Lorenzo de' Medici to make informed decisions not just about finance, but about political strategy. Tornabuoni's influence extended beyond finance. He was also a patron of the arts, commissioning important works in Rome. His wealth and connections allowed him to become a prominent figure in the Roman elite. He ensured that lucrative contracts for papal building projects, like the Sistine Chapel, often went to Florentine artists and craftsmen, further solidifying Medici influence and Florentine artistic preeminence. He even had his own tomb designed by the Florentine sculptor Andrea Bregno, a testament to his high standing. Despite the controversies surrounding popes like Sixtus IV, who engaged in nepotism and military ventures, Tornabuoni maintained the Medici Bank's position as the leading papal banker. This was a testament to his negotiating skills, his financial astuteness, and his deep understanding of the Vatican's complex internal politics. Other banking houses constantly vied for the papacy's business, but Tornabuoni consistently outmaneuvered them, ensuring the Medici remained the primary financial partner. By the time of his death in 1490, Giovanni Tornabuoni had been instrumental in maintaining the Medici's financial dominance in Rome for decades. He saw the bank through prosperous times and turbulent periods, always safeguarding its lucrative ties to the papacy. His long tenure and deep trust underscored the critical role played by loyal and capable managers in the Medici network's global success. He was more than a banker. He was a strategic asset, a financial diplomat whose mastery of the papacy's gold keys gave the Medici an unprecedented level of power and information, solidifying their position at the very heart of European finance and politics. His legacy was etched in the vast sums that flowed through his ledgers, and the enduring influence his family wielded due to his unwavering service to the Medici. Number 5. The head of the firm, from Florence to everywhere. Imagine the master strategist, the man who quietly ran the daily operations of an empire, ensuring its vast tentacles reached across Europe. Francesco Sassetti, the general manager of the Medici Bank for over 40 years, was that indispensable figure. He was not a Medici by blood, but his loyalty, financial genius, and tireless work made him arguably the most powerful employee in the entire Medici network. His story is one of unwavering dedication, incredible trust, and the quiet, behind-the-scenes power that kept the gears of Europe's leading bank turning, making him an integral, if often understated, force in the Medici's rise and enduring success. Francesco Sassetti, born in 1421, came from a modest Florentine family. His origins were not aristocratic, a testament to the Medici's meritocratic approach to hiring their most crucial staff. He began his career at the Medici Bank in Florence in the early 1440s, learning the intricacies of international finance from the ground up. He quickly proved his intelligence, diligence, and integrity. Cosimo de' Medici, the patriarch, recognized his talent early on. Sassetti became the right-hand man first to Cosimo, then to his son Piero, and finally to his grandson Lorenzo the Magnificent. This continuity of service across 3 generations of Medici leaders speaks volumes about the trust placed in him. By the 1460s, Sassetti was appointed general manager of the entire Medici Bank. This was an executive role of immense authority. While the Medici family members held ultimate ownership and made strategic political decisions, it was Sassetti who oversaw the day-to-day operations of the vast enterprise. His responsibilities were staggering. He managed the capital of the parent company in Florence, coordinated operations across all the bank's numerous international branches, and grew from London to Bruges to Rome to Naples, and supervised the individual branch managers. He was the nerve center of the entire network, ensuring financial stability, managing risk, and optimizing profits. Sassetti's power lay in his unparalleled understanding of the bank's intricate workings. He was intimately familiar with every ledger, every loan, and every major client. His financial acumen was legendary. He was responsible for making key investment decisions, approving large loans, and devising strategies to navigate complex economic and political landscapes. When a branch faced difficulties, it was Sassetti who formulated the response. When new opportunities arose, it was his judgment that often dictated the bank's moves. Historians who have examined the Medici Bank's extensive records, such as Raymond de Roover, consistently highlight Sassetti's central role in the bank's administrative and financial success. His relationship with Lorenzo the Magnificent was particularly close. Sassetti served as Lorenzo's chief financial advisor and trusted confidant. Lorenzo, increasingly drawn to politics and patronage, relied heavily on Sassetti to manage the bank's day-to-day operations, allowing him to focus on statecraft and cultural pursuits. Their correspondence reveals a relationship built on deep mutual respect. Sassetti not only provided financial advice, but also often offered political counsel, demonstrating the breadth of his influence. When the bank faced crises, such as the massive losses incurred in the Bruges branch under Tommaso Portinari, it was Sassetti who worked tirelessly to contain the damage and devise recovery strategies. Beyond his financial duties, Sassetti was a prominent figure in Florentine society. His immense wealth, accumulated through his high salary and careful investments, allowed him to become a significant patron of the arts himself. His most famous commission is the Sassetti Chapel in the Church of Santa Trinita in Florence, adorned with magnificent frescoes by Domenico Ghirlandaio depicting scenes from the life of St. Francis and portraits of Sassetti's family, and even Lorenzo de' Medici himself. This lavish chapel served as a public testament to his wealth, piety, and close association with the powerful Medici. It showcased his taste and his ability to command the services of the era's greatest artists. Sassetti's long tenure and his ability to maintain the bank's profitability for decades, despite growing challenges and risks, solidified his reputation. He navigated economic downturns, political upheavals, and the inherent dangers of international finance with remarkable skill. His leadership ensured that the Medici Bank remained at the pinnacle of European finance for much of the 15th century, even as external factors and internal shifts in Medici family focus began to sow the seeds of its eventual decline. Francesco Sassetti died in 1490, just 2 years before Lorenzo the Magnificent. His passing marked the end of an era for the Medici Bank. He was the last of the truly great, long-serving, non-Medici managers who possessed the blend of financial acumen, unwavering loyalty, and sheer administrative capability required to run such a sprawling, complex enterprise. He was the powerful, unseen hand that guided the bank's vast operations, making him an indispensable pillar of the Medici's financial empire and a true giant in the world of Renaissance banking. Number 4. The gouty hand that held the gold. Imagine a man plagued by chronic illness, whose very hands were twisted by agonizing pain, yet who managed to guide one of Europe's most powerful financial empires through its most turbulent succession. Piero di Cosimo de' Medici, known as Piero the Gouty, was not a charismatic leader like his father Cosimo or his son Lorenzo. He was a cautious, often sickly, yet remarkably resilient banker and statesman who, despite immense challenges, ensured the Medici's continued dominance in Florence and the strength of their bank. His story is one of quiet determination, shrewd political maneuvering, and the unseen power of a fragile hand that kept an empire from crumbling during a critical transition. Piero was born in 1416, the only surviving legitimate son of Cosimo de' Medici, the architect of the Medici Bank's wealth and political power. From an early age, Piero was groomed to inherit the family's vast financial and political interests. He was educated in banking, commerce, and statecraft, accompanying his father on diplomatic missions and learning the intricacies of the family business. However, unlike his robust father, Piero suffered from severe gout, a debilitating joint disease that caused him constant pain and often left him unable to walk or even hold a pen. This physical frailty earned him the moniker the Gouty and led many to underestimate him. When Cosimo de' Medici died in 1464, a profound power vacuum opened in Florence. Many rival families who had been held in check by Cosimo's formidable authority saw an opportunity to challenge Medici dominance. They believed that the sickly Piero would be an easy target, unable to command the respect or wield the power of his father. Indeed, the initial period of his leadership was marked by intense political intrigue and open challenges to Medici rule. Opponents formed alliances whispering that the Medici were now weak and could be overthrown. Piero's primary challenge was to consolidate his family's political control while simultaneously maintaining the stability and profitability of the sprawling Medici bank. He faced significant internal and external pressures. Within Florence, the powerful Luca Pitti, once a close ally of Cosimo, led a faction that sought to undermine Piero's authority. Outside the city, the Medici bank faced increasing competition and some risky investments made under Cosimo's later years, such as the large loans to Duke Philip the Good of Burgundy, were starting to show signs of trouble. Despite his physical limitations, Piero proved to be a far more capable leader than his detractors anticipated. He relied heavily on his trusted advisors, notably Francesco Sassetti, the general manager of the bank. Piero's genius lay in his quiet resolve and his shrewd political instincts. He skillfully uncovered the plots against him, particularly the conspiracy led by Luca Pitti in 1466. Rather than resorting to brute force or widespread executions, Piero often chose a path of reconciliation and clemency, skillfully disarming his opponents and co-opting some into his network. This pragmatic approach, while sometimes criticized as weak by more aggressive elements, ultimately strengthened the Medici's hold over Florence. Financially, Piero undertook a review of the Medici Bank's international branches. He implemented more cautious lending policies, particularly in light of some of the problematic loans that had begun to accumulate. He oversaw the consolidation of some accounts and tried to rein in the more adventurous branch managers, a strategy that aimed at long-term stability rather than aggressive growth. His careful stewardship of the bank's resources was crucial during a period of transition, ensuring that the vast fortune accumulated by Cosimo remained largely intact, providing the foundation for Lorenzo's later cultural and political ambitions. Piero also maintained and strengthened the Medici's vital international alliances. He continued his father's diplomatic relations with the papacy and various European rulers, ensuring that the Medici Bank remained their preferred financial partner. This diplomatic skill, often conducted from his sickbed, was essential for the bank's continued international reach and profitability. He understood that the bank's financial power was inextricably linked to the Medici's political standing. Though less known for his artistic patronage than his father or son, Piero was also a discerning collector and patron. He continued the family's tradition of acquiring valuable manuscripts, ancient sculptures, and commissioning paintings. He adorned the Medici Palace with remarkable works of art, further solidifying the family's image as cultural leaders. This patronage, too, was supported by the bank's resources and contributed to the Medici's overall prestige. Piero di Cosimo de' Medici died in 1469, after only 5 years at the helm. His reign, though short, was incredibly significant. He inherited an empire in a precarious state, both politically and financially, and against considerable odds. He handed it over to his sons Lorenzo and Giuliano, largely intact and arguably stronger. His quiet competence, his strategic political maneuvering, and his cautious yet firm hand in managing the Medici Bank ensured that the family's power endured. He was the vital, often overlooked, link between the founding generation and the magnificent era of Lorenzo, proving that true power is not always loud or outwardly dynamic, but can be found in resilient, unwavering stewardship, even from a sickbed. Number 3. The Magnificent Banker and the Golden Age's Cost. Imagine a man whose name still echoes through history, synonymous with an age of unparalleled art, philosophy, and political brilliance. So Lorenzo de' Medici, known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, was the greatest patron of the arts the Renaissance ever saw, a shrewd diplomat, and the de facto ruler of Florence. Yet, at his core, he was also a banker, the inheritor of the vast Medici financial empire. While he led Florence to its cultural zenith, his focus on statecraft and grand patronage, coupled with external pressures, marked a turning point for the Medici Bank, eventually contributing to its decline. His story is one of immense personal power, the subtle shift from banker to statesman, and the ultimate cost of using a bank to fund an age of magnificence. Lorenzo was born in 1449, the eldest son of Piero the Guti and Lucrezia Tornabuoni. From a young age, he was groomed for leadership. Unlike his father, Lorenzo possessed charisma, intellect, and a natural affinity for politics and the arts. He received an exceptional education, tutored by the finest scholars, mastering Latin, Greek, poetry, and philosophy, alongside the essential skills of banking and diplomacy. He was Cosimo's favorite grandson, and from early adolescence, he was involved in the family's affairs, traveling to Rome to represent Medici interests and learn the intricacies of the papal court. When his father, Piero, died in 1469, Lorenzo, at just 20 years old, inherited the reins of both the Medici Bank and the family's unofficial rule over Florence. The young man was immediately tested. Within the first few years, he faced conspiracies against his rule, most notably the Bloody Pazzi conspiracy of 1478, orchestrated by rival Florentine families with the backing of Pope Sixtus IV. The plot resulted in the assassination of his beloved brother Giuliano in the Florence Cathedral and a near-fatal attack on Lorenzo himself. He survived and, with the support of the Florentine people, ruthlessly crushed the conspirators, cementing his political control and demonstrating his steely determination. Lorenzo's power as a banker was inherited, but his focus was different from his predecessors. While Cosimo had used the bank primarily to accumulate wealth and secure political influence, Lorenzo increasingly used the bank's resources to fund his political ambitions, his diplomatic endeavors, and, most famously, his extraordinary patronage of the arts. He spent vast sums on commissioning masterpieces from artists like Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci, building libraries and supporting scholars. This made Florence the epicenter of the Renaissance, but it came at a significant financial cost to the bank. Under Lorenzo, the Medici Bank began to shift from a purely commercial enterprise to an instrument of state policy and personal prestige. He initiated large, risky loans to friendly rulers and cities, often with dubious prospects of repayment. While some of these were strategic, aimed at securing alliances or preventing wars, they tied up substantial capital that could have been used for more profitable commercial ventures. The huge losses incurred by the Bruges branch due to Tommaso Portinari's loans to Charles the Bold of Burgundy, which unfolded during Lorenzo's leadership, were a major blow that he struggled to mitigate. Historians, like Christopher Hibbert, detail how Lorenzo's attention was often divided, and his personal interest lay more in politics and culture than in the granular details of banking ledgers. Lorenzo's administration of the bank was marked by a centralization of authority in Florence, and a tighter control over the branches, but also by a growing reliance on borrowing from the bank's deposits to cover his own expenses and those of the Florentine state. This practice, while common among powerful families, put a strain on the bank's liquidity. The Medici Bank also faced increasing competition from other Italian and German banking houses, and the economic landscape of Europe was changing, making traditional banking models less profitable. Despite these challenges, Lorenzo remained a formidable figure on the European stage. His diplomatic skills were legendary. After the Pazzi conspiracy and the ensuing war with the papacy and Naples, Lorenzo undertook a daring personal mission to Naples, securing a peace treaty that saved Florence from certain defeat. This diplomatic coup showcased his unparalleled political acumen and solidified his reputation as a peacemaker and a master of statecraft. His political network, bolstered by his banking connections, extended from the courts of France and England to the Ottoman Empire. And Lorenzo's magnificent patronage, while culturally enriching, also served a political purpose. It solidified the Medici's image as benevolent, cultured rulers, distracting from their increasing authoritarian control over Florentine Republican institutions. The lavish festivals, the public buildings, and the support for artists and scholars all reinforced the Medici's status as the city's undisputed leaders. Lorenzo de' Medici died in 1492 at the relatively young age of 43, likely from complications related to gout, the family ailment. His death marked the end of Florence's golden age under Medici rule. While his legacy is rightly celebrated for his cultural contributions and political statesmanship, the Medici Bank was in a much weaker position than when he inherited it. The reliance on the bank's capital for political and personal expenses, coupled with large unrepaid loans and changing economic conditions, meant that the financial bedrock of the Medici dynasty had begun to erode. His power was immense, but it came with a significant cost to the family's original source of wealth. He was the magnificent banker who perhaps loved art and power more than ledgers, and in doing so shaped an era but set his family's financial empire on a path toward its eventual collapse. Number 2. The architect of the empire. Imagine a man who, from humble beginnings, leveraged financial genius to build an empire, not of land or armies, but of money and influence. Cosimo de' Medici, born in 1389, was that man. He was the true architect of the Medici Bank's power and the founder of the Medici dynasty's political dominance in Florence. His story is one of relentless ambition, extraordinary financial acumen, and the strategic use of wealth to reshape an entire city and influence the fate of nations. He was the patriarch, the visionary, the original power banker whose decisions laid the foundation for generations of Medici rule. Cosimo's family, the Medici, were originally wool merchants and minor bankers. It was Cosimo's father, Giovanni di Bici de' Medici, who first transformed the family's fortunes, establishing a solid and respected banking house. But it was Cosimo who took this foundation and expanded it into a truly international financial empire. From a young age, Cosimo was deeply involved in the family business, learning the intricacies of international finance, foreign exchange, and complex accounting. He was shrewd, cautious, and incredibly astute at identifying lucrative opportunities. Cosimo's financial genius lay in his understanding of the interconnectedness of banking, trade, and politics. He perfected the structure of the Medici Bank, establishing branches in major European cities like London, Bruges, Geneva, Lyon, and Rome. Each branch operated as a separate partnership, with the Medici parent company in Florence holding the majority share. This decentralized structure allowed for flexibility and risk management, as losses in one branch did not necessarily cripple the entire network. He also pioneered the use of innovative financial instruments like the bill of exchange, which allowed money to be transferred across vast distances without the physical movement of coin, reducing risk and increasing efficiency. The most crucial aspect of Cosimo's banking strategy was his relationship with the papacy. The Medici Bank became the primary bankers to the Pope, managing the vast revenues of the Catholic Church. This meant handling income from tithes and offerings collected across Christendom, providing loans to the popes for their lavish building projects and military campaigns, and facilitating diplomatic payments. This privileged position brought immense wealth to the Medici, securing a steady stream of commissions, interest, and favorable financial terms. It also granted Cosimo unparalleled political leverage, as the Pope was heavily reliant on the Medici's financial services. This financial control over the papacy gave Cosimo an incredible degree of influence over European politics and religious affairs. Cosimo's power was not just financial, it was deeply political. He used his immense wealth to gain control over the Florentine government, not through overt dictatorship, but through subtle manipulation. He carefully cultivated alliances, provided loans to prominent citizens, paid off political opponents, and ensured that his supporters held key positions in the Florentine Republic. He preferred to operate from behind the scenes, famously stating that 50 years of tyranny is nothing for a man who is rich. He lived modestly in public, but his vast private wealth and hidden influence allowed him to steer the city's affairs without holding an official king-like title. His political ascent was not without challenges. In 1433, rival Florentine families, particularly the Strozzi and the Albizzi, fearing his growing power, managed to have Cosimo arrested and exiled. However, Cosimo's financial network was so extensive and his support among the common people so strong that his exile lasted less than a year. He orchestrated his triumphant return in 1434, and from that moment, his control over Florence became absolute. He ruthlessly purged his opponents, confiscating their assets, which further enriched the Medici coffers. This marked the definitive beginning of Medici rule in Florence. Cosimo was also a significant patron of the arts and learning, famously supporting artists like Donatello and Brunelleschi and founding the Platonic Academy. His patronage was not merely a love of beauty, it was a strategic investment in his family's prestige and a way to project an image of benevolence and wisdom. The construction of the magnificent Palazzo Medici in Florence, his family's primary residence, was a symbol of his wealth and power, subtly designed to impress without overtly challenging Republican ideals. By the time of his death in 1464, Cosimo de' Medici was known as the Pater Patriae, or Father of the Fatherland, a title posthumously bestowed by the Florentine Signoria. He had transformed his family from powerful bankers into the undisputed rulers of Florence. He had built a financial empire that stretched across Europe, wielding influence over popes, kings, and merchants. His success was a testament to his clear vision, his meticulous attention to detail in banking, and his mastery of political maneuvering. He was the foundational power banker, the silent sovereign, whose legacy endured for generations, shaping the very course of the Renaissance. Number 1. The scion, the power behind the bank. Giovanni de' Medici, born in 1360, is the name few remember, yet he is perhaps the most crucial figure in the entire Medici story. He was not the flamboyant patron like Lorenzo, nor the grand political architect like Cosimo. Instead, Giovanni was the cautious, hard-working, and exceptionally shrewd businessman who quietly and meticulously transformed a modest family venture into the bedrock of a financial empire. His story is one of foundational power, the meticulous laying of groundwork, and the quiet financial genius that set the stage for everything that followed. Without Giovanni, there would be no Cosimo, no Lorenzo, no Medici dynasty. He was the unsung power banker who made it all possible. Giovanni de' Medici was the son of Everardo de' Medici, a relatively undistinguished member of the Medici family. His early life was modest, and he started his career in the banking business under his uncle Vieri de' Medici. This was a challenging time for Florentine banking. Previous large banking houses had collapsed due to reckless loans to kings, and the Black Death had repeatedly ravaged Europe, causing economic instability. Giovanni learned from these mistakes, adopting a philosophy of caution, diversification, and steady growth rather than spectacular, risky ventures. In 1397, Giovanni made the pivotal decision to establish his own bank, the Medici Bank, initially based in Rome. He understood the immense financial potential of the papacy. The church was a colossal institution with vast revenues flowing in from across Europe, and it needed reliable bankers to manage these funds, facilitate transfers, and provide loans. Giovanni shrewdly cultivated relationships within the Roman Curia, proving his reliability and discretion. This focus on the papacy became the cornerstone of the Medici Bank's success. He secured the crucial position as the official bankers to the Pope, a privilege that brought a steady stream of business, guaranteed revenues, and invaluable political connections. Giovanni's genius lay in his meticulous management and his innovative approach to banking structure. He understood the inherent risks of a single centralized bank. Instead, he pioneered a system of semi-independent partnerships. The main bank in Florence acted as the parent company, providing capital and oversight, but each international branch in Rome, Venice, Naples, and later Geneva, Lyon, Bruges, and London operated as a separate partnership with its own managers and a portion of its own capital. This limited liability model meant that if one branch failed or incurred significant losses, it would not necessarily bring down the entire banking empire. This was a radical innovation for its time and provided a crucial layer of protection that other banking houses lacked. Under Giovanni's quiet leadership, the Medici Bank grew steadily and consistently profitable. Well, he was a master of foreign exchange, currency transfers, and merchant banking, facilitating the vast trade networks that connected Florence to the rest of Europe. He invested prudently in Florentine industries, particularly the thriving wool and silk trades, further diversifying the family's income. Giovanni also understood the importance of maintaining excellent relationships with his clients and partners, building a reputation for trustworthiness and financial solidity. Beyond finance, Giovanni was also the first Medici to begin the family's subtle involvement in Florentine politics. While he did not seek overt power, he carefully cultivated allies within the Florentine government and ensured that his family's interests were protected. He learned from the spectacular downfall of previous rich families who challenged the Republican structure too directly. He preferred to operate behind the scenes, using his wealth and influence to support favored candidates and maintain a stable political environment conducive to his business. He famously advised his son Cosimo to keep out of politics as much as possible, advice Cosimo would largely ignore, but the sentiment reflected Giovanni's cautious nature. Giovanni also began the Medici family's tradition of discreet but significant patronage. He commissioned the rebuilding of the Church of San Lorenzo in Florence, entrusting the work to Filippo Brunelleschi, one of the greatest architects of the Renaissance. This act of public generosity, funded by the bank's profits, enhanced the family's prestige and solidified their image as benevolent citizens despite their growing wealth. When Giovanni de' Medici died in 1429, he left behind an unprecedented legacy. He had accumulated a vast fortune, estimated to be one of the largest in Europe. More importantly, he bequeathed to his son Cosimo a meticulously managed, highly profitable, and strategically structured banking empire. He had laid the financial and structural foundations that enabled Cosimo to transform the family from rich bankers into the de facto rulers of Florence. Giovanni was the silent engine, the shrewd calculator, the patient builder who forged the golden key that unlocked the Medici's future. His power was not flashy or ostentatious, but it was fundamental, the essential groundwork upon which all the subsequent magnificence of the Medici was built. Without his quiet genius, the Renaissance, as we know it, might have looked very different.